All right. So one of the first questions that I got, I actually received this one beforehand, and I'll start there. I really like this question is, what do I do the first thing in the morning when I come to my desk? And it kind of depends on the day, but if I can get it in the morning, the first thing that I like to do is I like to open with a word of prayer and open with a personal devotion. It kind of bounces back and forth. It'll either be straight scripture. I'll go in streaks. I'll do a month of just straight scripture, or I'll get into a book that is something topical about youth ministry, uh, something like that. But I really like daily devotionals. Right now, we had a book called Solo, and it takes a chunk of scripture and then really uh, kind of has you go through and ask questions, things like that. And I just find that helps prepare me from day to day. I can't say that I do it every day because some days I'm running into the office like today. I didn't get in until 2:30, and I had about 17 things to do in about 7 seconds to do it. And so, unfortunately, it's one of those things where I ended up starting going office to office to office, talking with people, and before you knew it, I was out again. And I really find that those are the days that I really feel lacking and missing. And so, uh, first thing I like to do, I strive to do, is start in the Word. All right. I'm gonna go to another question here. One of the questions that I got was share a favorite Jesus moment or something that was a particular starting point of my faith or something like that. And I guess I would say one of my favorite Jesus moments was back when I was a counselor at camp. It was the last week of the summer. It was quite possibly the last week that I would be a counselor at camp. I knew the next summer I would be moving on to other things. And it was my last night to lead devotion and play guitar. And I got to play with my two best friends. It's just the way the guitar schedule worked out. And we were really excited to do that. But that night it rained, and so we were all jam packed into the chapel. And I actually like that because we're so much closer and it's so much louder. And that night the kids just sang their heart out, and it wasn't a screaming, it wasn't a yelling, it was an actual this outpouring from the heart of each and every one of these 125 kids. And usually campfire went from 8:30 to 9 or 9:15, something like that. We stopped at 10:30. I kept looking around, looking at the other counselors, saying, "Should we stop?" And we just didn't want to. We didn't want to break that wonderful Holy Spirit moment. Uh, I love seeing those types of moments. I saw it again the very first week that I was here at Youth Encounter. I went to the Wisconsin Dells trip or Wisconsin Dells event, and you could see some of that same stuff. These kids who were just they forgetting that they were cool, forgetting that they needed to act a certain way, and just getting excited about jumping up and down and praising God. We got a question from the group. Hey Tom, thank you for doing this so that we can get to know you. What drew you to Youth Encounter? Well, uh, when I left camp back in 2010, I wanted I had a very clear goal of being in leadership in a nonprofit. And so I took a job with Thrivent with the very specific reason the job that I took I knew would put me in a lot of different in front of a lot of people who are in the nonprofit world and could lead me to the path that I wanted there. And about a year ago, a good friend of mine who I knew, who happens to be a YE alum, she let me know that Larry was going to be retiring, and she thought that I'd be a really great fit for the organization. And so I started having conversations, and the exciting thing for me was that it was getting back into youth ministry, something that I have a passion for. It was nonprofit works, and between nonprofit and corporate work, uh, that's where I really can flourish, and that's where I can best use the skills and the talents that God has given me. And so, uh, Youth Encounter was really the best of both worlds. And so, uh, once I got to know the board and the staff and things like that, it was very clear that this was the right place for me to be. And so far, uh, we've really seen that. And so I think it's been a good fit. At least I think it is. You'll have to ask my staff whether they think it's a good fit or not. Any other questions from the group? I'd rather answer your questions than ones that I make up. I'm going to take a moment here to go look at my question sheet. Uh, One of the questions that was asked is what makes me a good fit for this organization? What kind of experience do I have that puts me in a good spot to be a leader? I I've been thinking a lot and reading a lot about Moses and how Moses didn't feel equipped. Moses continually fought with God, asking him, "Why me? Why'd you pick me? I'm not the right guy for this." Uh, Now, I've always been very confident in my professional experiences and in the talents that I have and things like that. And so I'm not one to say why me, but I do look at Moses as someone who still knew that he needed to be equipped, that he needed an Aaron with him. And so when I look back at my experience, I have government experience working in the U.S. Senate. I have nonprofit experience, nonprofit leadership experience, working at a fairly large camp up in northern Wisconsin. I've worked in the corporate world at Thrivent, and almost all of my jobs have been within a faith-based atmosphere. And so all of those things I think line up really well to be able to lead this organization forward. But like Moses, I know that I need to have absolute trust in God, and so whatever gaps I do have, whatever wherever there's that need for an Aaron or whoever it might be, I know that God's going to provide that. And so, what do I think equips me best to lead Youth Encounter? I think it's that trusting faith in Christ and what God's going to do for me and us, I should say. Another question that I received was, what have I been doing to what have I been doing to kind of start the ball rolling as far as recasting a vision for Youth Encounter? I want to be very clear up front that when I was hired, the board said that I needed to do two things. One is to uh, really increase our development efforts, to make sure that we are building relationships, that we are talking with donors, alumni, supporters, advocates, volunteers, and really bringing people back into the fold, getting people excited about the mission of Youth Encounter again. The other piece was really to say, to look at what we're doing and set a new strategic direction for this organization. And that can mean a lot of different things. That can mean, uh, you know, it could mean tweaking what we're already doing, adding new programs, subtracting programs, going in a totally different direction. And so the first thing I did is I asked the board. I said, what are the sacred cows? What are the things that we need to continue to do? And after a couple moments thought, they said, you know what? the first and real only sacred cow is youth ministry. Whatever we're doing, we have to be affecting youth. We have to be affecting the faith lives of youth. And so that was very informative for me. That it's just that we're not going to move this organization to adult ministry or even cross generational in this very broad sense, but we need to be absolutely focused on youth. So what I've done is I've gone out and I've spent as much time as possible talking with pastors, youth leaders, alumni, donors, you name it. I've talked to them and starting to talk to them about what do they think is important in youth ministry. What does the church find of value right now? What are the holes in church ministry right now that Youth Encounter could fill? Those are all questions that I'm asking them. I'm asking them what their opinions were of Youth Encounter up until this point. What do they think is going well? What do they think is lacking? We had a full day brainstorming session with our entire staff, talking about what their hopes and dreams were for the organization. I also tomorrow actually I'm going to be holding a brainstorming session with pastors, youth leaders, community leaders, nonprofit leaders from around the Twin Cities here. And I very specifically asked people who were not part of Youth Encounter because I want ideas that are totally out of the box. And we're doing this brainstorming session tomorrow to start thinking about some of those same questions that I'm talking with alumni. And so those are some of the first steps that I've taken in moving forward with creating that new strategic direction. All right. Kevin Zimmerman, you asked, could you a quick summary of Meg's question? And Meg didn't have a question, but so far I've touched a little bit about my my experience. We've talked a little bit about what I do, the first thing I do when I come in the morning. We've talked about how I go about starting this new strategic direction. So looks like we have about 8 viewers on right now. That's really great. I would love to be answering questions from you guys. So I'm going to take just 2 quick moments here, let you guys start throwing questions up on the board. So why don't you guys go ahead and do that so I can answer your questions. If you have any questions, there's a little box on the right where you can enter in your questions and then hit enter, and it'll come in on my screen and I can answer those for you. All right. 2 questions. We'll start with, where do you see Youth Encounter in the next 5 to 10 years? Great question. I like to think of, when I look at strategic planning, I like to think of things in a 2-year, a 5-year, and a 10-year vision. Because, and quite honestly, every 2 to 5 years, you need to redo that strategic vision because so many things change. If you did a strategic vision in 2007, Well, the economic landscape changed so radically in 2008 and 2009 that more than likely that strategic vision doesn't make sense anymore. And so for the first 2 years, we need to get ourselves to financial viability, uh, financial stability. We need to get ourselves out of the hole that we've been in for a number of years now. We need to be offering programs that are cost effective, that are efficient, that are paying for the ministry that we're doing, for the staff, for all the overhead and things like that. Uh, Whatever we do moving forward, I keep calling it the shiny new bus. The shiny new bus has to be fuel efficient. It has to be able to pay for itself. We cannot continue to rely on personal loans and things like that from other people. In 5 years, I want to be having programs that are running smoothly, that we are in such a place that we are continually innovating. I, One of the things is this shiny new bus, we're not just going to come up with a bus that's going to be good to go and that we're going to be able to drive it for 10 years. That doesn't work anymore. Technology moves too fast. Culture moves too fast. We can't just say, this is it, and we're going to ride this bus for 10 years. We need to be in a situation in 5 years where we can easily and fluidly move from one thing to the next without too much overhaul of the entire organization. We need to be flexible. We need to be able to adapt. We need to constantly have our ear to the ground so that we know how we can best affect the faith lives of youth, how we can best meet youth where they are. And so that's one of the things that I'm really that's always on the back of my mind, I should say. As far as 10 years, I don't even want to answer that. That's way too far out right now for where we are. If we were a really healthy organization right now, I think we would have a better idea of what that would look like. But I think it's probably just too far out to speculate on that kind of a time frame. I'm really focused on the next probably year, the next 3 years, the next 5 years. So I hope that makes sense. Somebody asked, where did I grow up? I was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana. My dad's a pastor, and we moved immediately to North Dakota. And since then, my dad has bounced back and forth between North Dakota and Minnesota, and so I'm a Midwest boy. I went to college at North Dakota State University. So when people ask me, where did you grow up, I usually just say North Dakota. I guess I'll claim that. So that would be that. What do you and or church leaders you speak with consider the greatest need of youth today? That is a great question. One of the things that's come up in conversation with people as of late is the fact that there's no silver bullet for youth ministry. There's not something that we're going to come up with that's going to solve all the woes of the church, whether it be youth or attendance or things like that. And so you have big churches, you have small churches, you have city churches, you have rural churches, and things like that. Number one thing that we need to figure out first is who's our targeted market. We need to decide who is the church that we want to serve. Is it the rural church? Is it the church that doesn't have a youth leader, that doesn't have much volunteer support? Is it the bigger churches that have a lot going on for them, but they're just massively huge and we could fill a niche or fill a void? Those are all things that I think of when we think of what the needs of youth are. But to answer the question more directly, I believe that what youth want and what they need is that they need an opportunity to put their faith into action. Over and over and over, when I've talked with pastors and youth leaders and camp leaders and things like that, the number one thing that keeps bubbling to the surface is service, service, mission, mission, service, service, service. That's all they want to do. Kids are asking for it, and they're showing up for it. And when they show up for things like servant events or food packing events or things like that, they're bringing friends, and they're getting into good conversations with their friends about their faith lives. And it just kind of feeds upon itself. I believe that putting those types of opportunities in front of youth are not only getting them engaged in the church, but like I said, it's putting their faith in action. without getting into a works righteousness kind of conversation here, I think that's really, really healthy for someone's faith life is to be actively exercising that faith through a service component. We see it all over Scripture. We have, Christ's entire ministry was about service. He's, washing people's feet. He's telling people to give a cup of cold water to widows and orphans, leaving grain out on the fields for people. I mean, you look at our God. I mean, we as a people are a service project for all time. But God calls us to do this, and so that's what I think the greatest need of our youth is today, and one that I want to address. And I think our organization is actually really well poised to move in that direction. Kevin Zimmerman asks, what are some possible changes for teams in the next few years, and do you see international teams coming back? Honestly, I think my very honest answer is that teams need to be fixed somehow. We've seen less and less people that are interested in teams. We've seen it's harder and harder to get bookings for our teams, and it's not a very economically viable model right now. And I want to be very careful. I don't want anybody to take away from this that I'm only thinking in dollars and cents. That's far from the truth, because when I look at the ministry that we've done, we've arguably touched the most lives through our team, and through our teams and what they're doing. We need to figure out a way, though, that not only brings back the numbers that we used to have, but it also allows us to do it in a way that we don't have to worry so much every single day about where our teamers are sleeping, because they can have such an impact on it. But we got to figure out a smart way to do it. And so, what changes do I see for teams? There needs to be a number of changes. I just don't know what they are yet, and I'm sorry, that's really, really vague, but we're still in this brainstorming process. It would be unfair to say one thing or another because I just don't know yet. Some of the things that have been thrown out there is I'd like to see the teams have a shorter year. I think a year is a really long commitment these days for young people. I'd love to see like a 9-month team and a 3-month team. What that does is it matches it up with the academic calendar, and then it also allows camp people to get involved, because the way we run it right now, August to August, we're totally not allowing camp people to get on board with this, because there are camp people who want to do camp and then come and serve on a team, but they can't do that because they're not done with camp when teamers start. Or teamers want to do team, and when they come back around in May, they'd like to go work at camp. But that's not possible because we go to August. So I foresee one possible solution is to do academic calendar year team and then a summer team as well. So those are some things that I think about. The other thing you asked about, Kevin, is international teams. I would love to see international teams come back. My wife and I led 7 different mission trips down to Peru. My wife came along on 3 or 4 of those, and then 2 others to Colombia. And so I have a real heart for overseas missions. I also think that our international teams add a little bit of sex appeal, if you will, pardon the expression. But when you have people who are, your choice is to go to Oklahoma, or apologies to anyone who lives in Oklahoma, but Oklahoma or Denmark, you've probably been to Oklahoma, but you haven't been to Denmark, and that seems exciting. And you have a real opportunity to reach some people over there that have never heard the Word of God. And so I think there's some really great opportunities if we bring that back. But again, we have to do it in a way that's financially feasible. Mission trips are expensive, and they rarely break even. And so we have to find a way that makes sense for the organization itself, because we can't just keep running teams and keep running international teams that run us into the ground financially. We can't do that. I hope that makes sense to everybody. If you have follow-up questions on anything that I've said, please, or if I didn't make sense, or if something didn't jive, please throw up a follow-up question there, and I'll make sure to answer that. So we have a question looks like from Jamie. Oh, actually it's from Trish. There are alumni all over the country who would love to volunteer. How can alumni outside of Minnesota be more involved? That's a great question. Number one, we need you to be involved. That is number one. Moving forward, there's a number of ways that you can be involved. Number one, we need you to give financially. That's number one key right now. We need to survive. We need to get to the shiny bus. We need to pay for the shiny bus. Number two, of course, we always need your prayers, and we need your advocacy. We need you going out and talking with people about the great ministry that Youth Encounter has done over the years and is going to do into the future. We need you to be talking with pastors. We need you to be talking with youth leaders. These are things that you can do right now. You don't need our help. You don't need our direction on this. We need you to go and have a specific conversation. Call your pastor, call your youth leader, and say, could I have 20 to 30 minutes of your time in the next week, in the next 2 weeks? I'd like to talk with you about a ministry that I was involved in, and I'd like to see our church be involved in. That's a really great way to get the ball rolling. We would love for you guys to go and find 4 or 5 or 6 other people who you know have a passion for youth and who are excited about youth ministry. Get them together, have them over to your house, invite them over for some wine and cheese or something like that, and tell them about the really great ministry that has going on. Give me a call. I will come and be part of that. We can have wine and cheese with the president. We can have dinner with the president, lunch with the president, coffee with the president. Doesn't matter to me. Go out and talk to people about what we're doing and get them excited. Introduce them to us so that we can get them engaged in the process. One of the big things that you guys can help out with, that alumni and other volunteers and donors can how they can get involved, is one of the cool things that we're thinking about right now is, I talked a little bit about it earlier, but increasing the amount of service components that we have with the events that we run around the country. And what I'd like to see is our volunteers going out to different churches, not just Lutheran churches, but all sorts of different churches, and saying, we're going to do this big food packing event, or we're going to do this hunger thing, and we're gonna go to volunteer at food shelves when we're at an event. We want to get as many people involved with this as possible. We're going to need your help as we start to look at building these events in new communities, in the existing cities that we're already in. We're going to need you guys to be our hands and our feet on the ground in that city, helping connect us to leaders, to community leaders, to church leaders, and things like that. So we're not asking you to go out and ask for money. We're asking you to go out and get people to get excited. Just have a conversation with them about Youth Encounter and what we're doing. And when it comes times, if you're living in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and we call up and say, we want to do this really great servant event type of event in your community, and we want to do it just around Sioux Falls, South Dakota churches, and we need every church on board because we're going to do this fantastic thing. We need you guys to go out there and do it, because it's not going to work for us to just call on the phone. You guys are the ones that have the relationships with the people in your community. So that's what we need. Question from Eric Ludke. How will Youth Encounter navigate new ministry models in the changing face of culture, specifically the rise of the nuns and the decline in membership of denominational congregations? That is a lot. Holy cow. So this is really a multifaceted question with a lot of different answers. And actually, I saw another question on a sheet that I got that talked about Lutheranism in particular. So I'm going to start there. Right now, uh, we have a Lutheran church that's really, really divided, especially between the two largest denominations, between the ELCA and the LCMS. Uh, they are so split that I've heard pastors say that LCMS is closer to Catholics than they are to ELCA, and I've heard ELCA are closer to Methodists, and that's really unfortunate because as an organization that calls ourselves a pan-Lutheran organization, it makes things really difficult for the things that we're trying to do because they just don't want to play in the same sandbox with each other right now, and that's really sad. So when you look at what is Youth Encounter's job, it is my opinion that Youth Encounter's job is to get kids really excited about Christ, about his death, about his resurrection, about his love for us. Those are the things that I think we should be preaching from the mountaintops. I think we should be talking specifically about the things that all Lutherans, all Christians can agree on. Jesus, death, resurrection, good. Service, good. When we get into the divisive topics, we need to stay away from those. I don't think it's Youth Encounter's business to be doing that because we can't right now as a pan-Lutheran organization. If we want to really dig into those topics, then we need to decide that we are going to be just an LCMS or just an ELCA or just a LCMC organization. Then we have the right to go and do that. But if we don't, we're just going to continue to lose people because they're not happy because we didn't call out this or we didn't affirm this or whatever it happens to be. But if we stay focused on the things that we only have these kids for a weekend, or if it's a team coming into a church, we only have them for 2 hours. We're not going to change their beliefs on homosexuality or women in the church or close communion or whatever it is in that short hour or in those couple hours during an event. But what we can do is we can get them really excited. We can edify their existing faith. We can show them how much God loves us in that time. We can show them how to be God's hands and feet through service. And so then it doesn't matter if you're Catholic or you're Lutheran or you're Methodist or whatever it is. You can get on board with those basic tenets of what we're doing. If those divisive topics do come up or something that's very denominational specific, then we have the ability to say, look, go and talk to your pastor, go and talk to your youth leader, go and talk to your parents about that issue. Because number one, we want you, if you're growing up in that church body, we want you to be able to hear it from the leaders that you're going to be with every single day. If we're turning them back to their pastors and their youth leaders, those people who already have a relationship with those kids, then they're going to be able to much better help them with their questions and things that they're struggling with moving on. Let's see here. I didn't quite get to all that question. I want to make sure that I am still there. Decline in membership of denominational congregations. That's a tough one. Part of me says that's not our fault. It is what it is. But on the other hand, we've touted ourselves as a resource to the congregation that we're right in there with them. So decline in membership and things like that, some of it is our fault. We haven't been all that we can be to make sure the kids are staying in the church and staying strong in their faith. And so how do we move to working with some of those non-denominational or outside of denomination people? Again, that's where I say let's not get caught up in these divisive denominational specific issues. Let's stay at the top and stay excited about the pure message of Jesus Christ dying on the cross, rising again. Those are the things that we need to keep on the front burner in front of kids right now. So I think we can do that through that message. I think we can do it through service. As I said earlier, when I was answering Joshua's question, youth are so hungering for service right now. They want to be out there helping other people. They're able to read about it on their cell phones every single day. They see it through social media. They want to help in some way. And it's not just Lutherans who want to help. It's not just Catholics. It's everybody, whether they have a strong faith or whether they don't have a faith at all. These people want to be excited about. They want to get out and help, and they're excited about service. And so that's how I think we can reach those people, is getting them in. I see it every day. My wife and I are very involved with Feed My Starving Children, and every time we go unpack, there's a lot of people there that don't have a faith, but they're there doing something really good for another group of people, and they're hearing a really strong Christian message at the end. And so I feel like we have the ability to do that uh, through some of our events. Let's see here. Youth encounter events are pretty basic in programming and have not changed in a number of years. How can programming such as these be refreshed and stay financially stable? Great question. That's what we're trying to answer right now. It kind of does go back to the fact, again, I want to be very careful that not everything is about numbers and cents, but right now that has to be my focus. My number one focus has to be that we're still doing ministry in 6 months, that we're still doing ministry a year from now. And what that means is making sure that we are financially stable. So what does that mean? We do need to invigorate our programs. That's a top priority for me right now. We cannot continue to do the same things that we have done for the last 10 to 15 years. It's just not happening. I'm hearing from youth leaders and pastors that the things that we're doing are still great, but not adding as much value as they once did. They're looking for something that's a little bit more fresh. They're looking for something that is current, that is relevant, that is keeping up with what we're doing. And so we do have to take a really hard look at all of our programs. That means our weekend programs that we run across the country. It means our teams. It means all the peripheral things that we do. Sounds Like Love. We've already talked about international teams and things like that. We need to find things that are financially viable, that are intersecting youth at a place where they are right now, and that will draw people in, that will say, and I do believe, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I do believe that service is that thing. I believe that getting kids, getting their hands dirty, working, and doing something and putting their faith in action is the way that we have to go. And so we are right now, we are innovating. We are looking at new ways of doing our programs so that we are not the same moving forward. We have to do that in order to make sure that we're still here. Question: have you ever attended a youth encounter event? Do you plan on joining the staff for any of the events this next year? Yes, I have. I have been to 2 events. The first thing I did, literally the first week I was here, is I went to the Wisconsin Dells event, and then I also I went to the Minneapolis event as well. I've been looking to go to go see a team in action, but we haven't had one close to us since I've been here. That's kind of my top priority, as well as I'd love to see a VBS program as well. I'm hoping to do that this summer. I'll be attending our Impact event next 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. So I'll be there. So the answer is yes. I have been to the events. I've seen what we're doing. They are very. I was very encouraged to see how many kids were there and the excitement level that we had there. I think I went to 2 of our larger events though, and so I really want to go to one of our smaller events and see what the vibe is there. Because smaller events and larger events, there's a huge difference in what you can do programming wise when you have 200 kids to 600 kids, and so we need to think about those things as we're moving forward. Do we have to have 600 kids for something to be successful, to be financially viable? There's a lot of different things that we can do. We can do with those things. Oh, we'll take a break here and do an easy one here. What was the last book you read, and would you recommend it? Uh, what kind of book do you want me to talk about? I really like to go back and forth. I'll read a fun, what I call candy book. I really, really like books like Jason Bourne novels or a Clive Cussler kind of action adventure novels. And so I just read a Clive Cussler one. What was it called? I don't even remember. But everyone's favorite hero, Kurt Austin, was saving the day from worldwide destruction. It was fantastic. Would I recommend it? Eh. I also just read a book called Mission Drift, and this was a book about uh, organizations that uh, start with a Christian mission in mind, and then they get further and further away from that. Uh, they had a couple really good examples. There was an example of uh, an organization that was specifically about sharing the Christian message with orphans across the world, and they were doing really well. And they have moved so far away from that mission that they even want to stay away from a Christian message. They're still a great big organization doing wonderful things, but they are no longer anywhere near. Harvard University was a really great example of that. Harvard University started to specifically train up Christian leaders in society. And while their mission statement still mentions God, they want nothing to do with it, and they don't allow any kind of faith components going on within their staff and within their programming, things like that. Again, it's an organization that has gone so far away from what they're doing. So the really great thing about reading this book to me was what what is Youth Encounter? What is our mission, and how do we stay focused on that? And that's a question that I would actually have you guys think about right now. What is Youth Encounter? Is it the events that we do? Is it teams? Or is it uh, sharing the gospel? Is it international? Is it domestic? We did an exercise with the staff. Okay, this question isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, but we're going to continue on. We did an exercise with the staff where we asked, with our organization, why do we do what we do? How do we do it? And what is the thing that we do? And the example we used was Apple. Apple starts with, we want to make life better, more integrated, more efficient. How do we do this? We do this by creating products that are an extension of you, that seamlessly transition from product to product. We just happen to make phones. That's the what. Okay? And so when you start with Youth Encounter, our core mission is to share the gospel with other people. How do we do this? We happen to do this through youth ministry, not adult ministry, not young children's ministry. It's through youth ministry. And what do? We do events and we do teams. Those are the things that we do. So at its core, when you talk about mission drift, we really need to stay with sharing the gospel, and I would even argue that how needs to stay the same as well. We need to stay with youth ministry. And again, the board told me that it's one of the sacred cows. We have to make sure that we're still doing youth ministry. The what is where we can start changing, where we can start innovating, and where we can start playing with things that still do the core ministry, but just doing it in a different way. So Mission Drift would be the book that I read, and it's fantastic. Read it. Does YE have a specific committed development department with development officers and team? You're looking at it. I'm the guy. We have not had a committed development team since Brett Koopman left. We have Veronica Williams, who's on our team, who has been what I would call a development associate role, doing a lot of the processing of donations that come in, sending out thank you letters, and also doing some grant work. When you really though talk about development work, you're talking about going out and sitting across from somebody in their homes at a coffee shop. You're talking about moving them from giving $100 to giving $1,000, from $1,000 to $10,000. You're talking about the development of endowments and expectancy gifts and things like that. And so one of the reasons uh, that I believe that I was hired was some of my development experience that I do have, and my willingness to get out there and meet with people and start down that road, because we need to reinvigorate our development staff. Veronica, who I mentioned earlier, we've just kind of stepped up her responsibilities to become a little bit more involved in this type of thing. Uh, we've already started to step up our communication with staff, or I'm sorry, with volunteers, with donors, and things like that. And so things that I'm going to be focusing on is making regular contact with people who have been donors to us in the past. And so my my sincere wish is that inside of a year or two that we do have a dedicated development person on our staff, because I can't be I can't be running all over the United States, uh, making 200 phone calls a week to donors. I don't have the time for that. There's a lot of other cookie jars that I need to have my hands in, and so for the meantime, I'm taking the majority of that work, and Veronica is helping me as well. We also have a lot of other great staff who are talking with alumni. Jamie works with alumni. Meg in our office is doing a lot of different things as far as logistics and making sure that we're in contact with the right people at the right time. So right now it's kind of an all hands on deck, but moving forward we are going to try to have that. Question: if we want to visit with church friends and others about Youth Encounter, are talking points available to us? Specific focus points? Great follow-up question to what I talked about earlier. That is something that we can definitely put together. Meg, I hope you're still listening, and I hope that you're writing this down so that we can start to focus on that. The website is a really great place to go to just start talking about the different things that we have. You can see the different programs that we offer. As an alumni, you probably already know more about Youth Encounter than you really think. The thing that I would actually really stress to you is to make the emotional appeal. You can throw out all sorts of stats and statistics about how many kids we've reached over the years, about how many programs we have, and how many states and countries we're in. But what's really, really going to have an effect is your own personal story about what Youth Encounter has done for you and the effect that you had on another person. Think to that just right now, what's the best Youth Encounter story that you have when you were on team or when you were on staff here at Youth Encounter? What's the best thing that you can remember? Now think about that and turn it into a story and go tell somebody about it. That's the way I would do it. That's the way it worked. When I worked at Thrivent, I coached a lot of the financial reps, and you'd be amazed. You could get in front of somebody and tell them that their portfolio was going to, increase by 3% with this, by doing this, and that Thrivent was this strong. We had this much money in the bank. We're too big. We're never going to fail, and all this kind of stuff. But it's when you sat there and said, you know what? I was able to help this family when they had a medical emergency because I had set up a financial plan for them, that they were able to move, that they didn't have to sell their house. They didn't have to do this or that. They were set. That has way more an effect than anything else. So think about your personal story and go and tell that when you sit down with a pastor or a youth leader. Show them how Youth Encounter has had a direct effect on the faith life of a kid, whether it was through something you did or one of your teamers or something like that. Follow-up question from Eric. Ecumenism, it's a hard word to say, has been a focus of YE's ministry for the past 20 years, and yet the LCMS and ELCA seem to be growing further and further apart What theological stumbling blocks do you think Youth Encounter needs to address? Hmm. You know, the biggest one out there is homosexuality, especially when you talk between the ELCA and the LCMS. The role of women in the church is another one. Uh, this kind of sounds like the easy way out, but I don't want to address those issues. It's Youth Encounter should not be the end all be all voice of reason for these two synodical bodies. Um, our role is to be in relational ministry with youth. Our role is to be reaching youth wherever they are in their faith. And wherever they are in their faith, they need to know that that they have a friend in Jesus, that they have someone who loves them and loved them so much that he died on the cross, that he rose again, and that they are going to have everlasting life with him because of that. Whatever it is they're struggling with. I think it's not so much a theological stumbling block that we have to deal with. I think it's the stumbling block of the actual church bodies that we have to deal with. We have to figure out, because right now both church bodies don't really are not necessarily recognizing us as something that we should. Sorry, my phone is blowing up. My two oldest boys are staying at my mom and dad's, and my mom just texted me like 17 times with pictures, so I apologize. Um, we need to figure out how to navigate the landscape between the ELCA and the LCMS. And quite frankly, I just want to say, here's who we are. We are going to be talking about these 3, 4, 5 points that any church body can get excited about. And if you don't like us, fine. That's fine. We're going to find other people who are excited about us. As I've been talking with other church bodies that are not Lutheran, they're really excited about us putting together a service type component into our events. They're really excited about that type of thing. They'll say, yes, we will come to that, because as long as you're not going to delve into these major theological issues, then that's okay with us. But what they don't want to do is they don't want to come to an event where we're going to cram Lutheranism down their throat. Again, I'm not throwing out the Lutheranism at all, because that is our heritage. I'm Lutheran to the core, and I believe, you know, the Lutheran theology is correct, and it's something that we can continue to teach from. That we can start with that Lutheran base, but we need to get past sticking divisive points of theology, and we need to get to a point where we are engaging more youth. I told the board when I started, I would much rather have 100 kids who are excited about God, but don't have every single Lutheran theological point correct. I'd rather have that than 10 kids who show up and have Lutheran theology down pat. I'd much rather have the 100 kids. So I hope that answers a little bit of what you were talking about, Eric. This is a really big subject, and I would tell each and every one of you, if you want to get into this is a really kind of a one-sided conversation here. I would love to have a phone conversation with you. If you're in town, I'd love to have coffee or lunch with you and talk about these things in larger detail, so that we can have more of a back and forth. So please reach out to me, whether it's through email, phone, or in person. We would love to have that conversation. Kevin Zimmerman asked the most important question of the night: favorite flavor of ice cream and why? I am slightly lactose intolerant, and so ice cream never really does it for me. Never have really loved it that much. But when I do eat ice cream, I am almost always in the chocolate realm, chocolate, peanut butter, that type of thing. Every time I go to Dairy Queen and get a Blizzard, I think I'm going to get something different, and it always ends up being peanut butter. cup blizzard. So chocolate, peanut butter, love those flavors. Questions from Becky Sunday. Are you dreaming about new directions that Youth Encounter can take? New collaborations? If so, how might it look? I am dreaming about new directions. Couple different things I'm thinking about right now. You talked about those new directions. I think we've kind of talked ad nauseum about really shifting more of the focus to a service component. I think other things that we can do when you think about collaborations. Sorry, before I get to collaborations, another programmatic idea that's come up a lot has been the idea of grandparents and grandparents' involvement with youth. Over and over and over, I hear that the people who are most concerned about the faith lives of youth are the grandparents. And so, what if we had a grandparent weekend? Coming from my camp background, I know that grandparent weekends go off really, really well because you have grandparents who are willing to bring the grandkids. They have the time to do it. They have the passion for making sure that their youth or that their grandkids are growing up in a strong faith, and they have the money to pay for it. And so when you take all of those things, this says this is fantastic. And so we can definitely grow programming through that. Now, I think that's a more of a peripheral program idea, and that'll come later. We need to get the big shiny bus going first, and then we'll deal with tricking it out with a spoiler and things like that. Collaborations that I think of, I see so many nonprofits out there that are struggling just like we are, that we can start sharing resources. I know of a nonprofit right now that doesn't have any bookkeeper or any financial people involved. And apologies to Beth, this would put more work on her plate. But if we were to team up with that organization and provide that source, or we share a receptionist, or we share a computer guy or something like that, those are just logistical collaborations that I think we can do to not only save each other money but resources as well. But more ministry collaborations. I want to look at the things that we don't do well and be able to bring them in. It doesn't make sense. I talk a lot about Chipotle because it's one of my favorite restaurants, and they are really good because they do one thing and they do it well. They do burritos. And if all of a sudden they were to start making hamburgers, both the hamburgers and the burritos would come down in quality. And so we need to decide as an organization what we're going to do really, really well. And then we need to go and do that. And when it comes time to something, if we want to add something else, well, let's go find the organization that already does that really, really well. I dream about, in the Minneapolis here, we have YouthWorks that does youth mission trips really, really well. I don't think we should be starting youth mission trips. I just want to refer them over to YouthWorks. And when YouthWorks, if someone calls them and says, hey, we'd really like to have somebody from your group come to our church and do something, they should be saying, you know who you should call? You should call Youth Encounter because they know what they're doing. And if we want to get involved in urban ministry, well, then we should be calling Urban Ventures, and we should be teaming up with them and really looking at cross marketing. When you look at the corporate world, they do this all the time, and it works fantastically well. But somehow when it comes to the church, when it comes to parachurch organizations, we have to hog it and say, no, these are just our people. It's just us, just here. We need to look at other organizations and say, how can you augment what we're doing because you already do it better? What has been a good interaction with current teamers or alumni that you've had so far? Well, we just had all the teamers in for VBS training. They came in, what was that, 2 weeks ago? And we needed them to do a better job of sponsorship. We needed them to be calling in, calling more people, and really getting some confidence around that. And so I had a training session with them that I led because it's something that I did a lot of, not only in my own personal experience, but help coach people at Thrivent. And so, I was coaching them and helping them through it. And I had a number of teamers come in and sit down and have a conversation about their group of people that they were calling and exactly why they were uncomfortable calling with them. And the really great thing to me is that we had that open conversation, that they were willing to come into my office, sit down on the couch, and sit and talk and say, this is why I'm uncomfortable, help me. Or what would you say to this? Or how would you answer this? And so I really thought that was a great interaction because, it showed that they had a willingness to do it once they had the right tools in place. Alumni, I've had nothing but great experiences with alumni so far. I've gone on to a lot of coffees and lunches with alumni talking about their experiences and hearing what they have for what their ideas are moving forward. Um, I had a bunch of alumni invite me this coming Saturday to a poker night, and I'm very excited about that. So I'm hoping that experience goes well because it's very possible that it won't, and I will walk away $20 poor. Question: at what moment did you know Youth Encounter was going to be a good fit for you as a leader and a person? Hmm. You know, I'll start with as a person. During my interview process, when I met with the board, I got to spend an hour with the staff, and it was about 10 minutes into that I knew that this was going to be a really good fit because I am not your typical politically correct, uh, kind of leader. Um, I, I wear flip flops. Okay, I think that pretty much says it all. But when I walked in the room and I saw Matt Plank wearing flip flops, I was like, okay, I'm gonna fit in here. And just kind of the easy joking that we had back and forth, just the way that we communicated. Um, it was during that interview process that I knew that this was going to be a good fit for me personally, uh, in my personal interactions with staff and things like that. Uh, as far as a leader, I think it was several weeks in when I got a lot of really great affirmations from the staff as far as we can't believe you're doing this, or wow, we're so excited, you show such energy, or uh, thanks for listening to me on this, or whatever it happened to be. Um, it it was just a really great outpouring of support where I knew that this organization that I've got the right skill set to lead this organization forward because unintentionally I'm starting to meet the needs of our staff, which means hopefully that translates to the fact of meeting the needs of the organization moving forward. Hope that helps. What other questions do we have? Don't have any other ones on my board here. I do want to share with you an idea that's been kind of rolling around with some of the people that I've been talking with. And I would love your feedback, whether it's through email or through phone calls or things like that. We keep talking about this service and we talk about different components about being financially viable. And one of the things that came up, I had a conversation with a pastor in Fargo who's doing an event that I think we can use a lot of the components of. They're doing what they call a hunger weekend. And this hunger weekend involves a 30-hour famine. They are doing food packing. They're volunteering at food shelves and soup kitchens and places like Second Harvest, or they're packing backpacks full of food for kids who don't get to eat on the weekends. And so they're doing all of this in a weekend. They still have some speakers. They still have a band. It's this high energy excitement, and the speaker pulls everything together at different parts during the weekend about putting their faith in action. And the really great thing about this is that it's based off of a community need. They sat in their community and decided what they were going to do. And hunger came right to the top of the list. And I imagine that's going to happen in almost every larger community, at least. So they have so many kids coming to this. They have 400 kids coming just from Fargo. And it's not just from the Lutheran Church, it's from the Catholic Church and the Methodist Church. They're all banding together to be Christ's hands and feet. They have so many adult volunteers that they have to turn people away. They have cross-generational relational ministry going on because you have an 85-year-old packing food right next to a 17-year-old. They are having a significant impact right in the community, right there, right now. And these kids are learning how to be a servant, and then they're going out and they're getting a template for how to do this later. That it's not just this weekend, but you can go and volunteer at that food shelf next week and next month. And you can go and pack food at this event and this event. Here's what's happening in your area where you can go and help. Get your friends together and go do it again. They've been using this model for the last 4 or 5 years, and it's been extremely successful. And I think this is something that we can easily tweak our existing events to, because we already have the space. We already have some of the kids there. We just need to amp it up as far as number of volunteers and the number of volunteers, the number of churches involved. I would love your feedback on a model that looks a little bit like this, because it incorporates a lot of the things that we're already doing at Youth Encounter, but tweaks it in such a way that I believe will engage youth and engage the church a lot more. Question: what struggles do you see in the next year for Youth Encounter, and how do you perceive dealing with those while still keeping up with team ministry? I think the biggest struggle and the biggest challenge right now is the uncertainty of where we are. I realize that a lot of my answers here tonight are probably not as succinct as you want them to be. You'd probably like me to say it's going to be A, B, and C. And that's just not where we are right now. We have to move fast, but I've been in this job for almost exactly three months now. And to say that we have this award-winning idea and this set of plans and this 5-year strategy already built out would not be truthful. We're still in development phase. We're still in brainstorming phase. And I would say over the next 2 months, we'll be in development phase. Which, in the end, if we're taking 6 months to create this shiny new bus, that's actually really way too fast to create something that's going to sustain a ministry moving forward. I think we all recognize that, but where we are with the organization, that's where we are. We can't just come up with something in 2 months, but we have to get it done pretty quickly. But right now we're right in the middle, and so we have a lot of vagueness. We just don't know where everything's going to land right now, and I think that's a challenge not only for our staff, because they don't know what this organization is going to look like in 6 months. It's challenging for our donors. Why? They know that we're in a difficult situation financially. Why keep throwing money at this? They've got this new leader, okay, but what are his ideas? I've met with a couple donors already, and I sit in front of them. I say, look, first of all, I don't have the right to ask you for money yet. We haven't developed a relationship yet, and I don't have 1, 2, 3, 4 really great ideas that we're going to implement quite yet. We're building them. They're coming out. We're starting to think that we've got maybe 2 or 3 that we're starting to think of. I'd like your opinions on that, but it's still in that category of vague. And so I do think that that's a challenge. And it's a challenge for our teamers coming in, especially the new teamers coming in, saying, what is our role going to look like in this organization moving forward? What are teams going to look like in the future? Uh, is there a place for me? And so those are all questions that should be asked and they should be thinking about. But um, it's that it's that area of the unknown that I think is going to be the real challenge for our staff, for our alumni, for our donors. And what I would ask for is patience. We need to have patience. It's coming. The new bus is coming, and it's coming soon. But we need to figure it out and have as many. We don't want to just walk onto the car lot and buy the first bus we see. We need to make sure that we're making at least a halfway informed decision about what we think is going to put us in the best position to move forward. And once we have that, then things are going to be a lot easier as far as selling this idea to donors, getting alumni to be on board and saying, yes, that's something I want to volunteer for. This is something that I want to go and talk to my pastor about. And then staff can also say, this is something that I want to stick around for. This is something that I'm excited about. I want a seat on that bus. And so those are the things that I think about. What does it look like for the alumni to be part of that development department and be making the calls and meeting with churches and potential donors? Again, I think it's the job of alumni is not to make the sale, it's to warm them up for it. Okay. Um, we buy. How often do we use Facebook or Twitter or some kind of social media when we say, hey, we're looking for a great place to go out to eat tonight. Where should we go? Or what movie should I watch? Or hey, we need someone to redo our sidewalk. Who do you know that's good? And we take the opinions of people all the time. If I know somebody, if I have a relationship with them and they know a little bit about me and I know a little bit about them, when they tell me to go see the new X-Men movie because it's really good, I'm going to take their suggestion and go to it. But if they tell me it's awful, then I maybe wait to rent it, right? We make a lot of our buying decisions based on other people's opinions and based on other people's experiences. And so I don't need you to go, you as alumni and staff and volunteers, I don't need you to go and do the sidewalk for me. I need you to go and tell those people about who would be a great person to do the sidewalk. So I need you to go out and talk to these potential donors. I need you to get people in. And to do that, you need to tell your story. You need to talk about how it made an impact on you and how it made an impact on other people. That alone will get people excited about what you're doing. And so once you have them warmed up, once they've said, wow, that sounds like a great ministry, then it's a simple thing of saying, would you mind getting a communication from our president or from our development department? Tom would really like to call and talk to you about potential involvement. Or maybe they want to volunteer. So maybe that's Jamie calling them and saying, hey, we heard you're interested. Or maybe they said, man, we would love to host a team. Well, let's call our client service department then. Let's get them in touch with the right people once they've shown a willingness to be engaged. But to do that, they need to get the opinion of someone that they trust. These random people out there, they don't know me. They don't know our staff, but they know you, the alumni. They know you. So go out and talk to them. They trust you. And if you tell them that you're part of this really, really great organization that's had a phenomenal impact on a lot of people, they're going to trust you on that. All you're doing is really setting them up now to be contacted by us. You're warming them up for us. Question from Adrian. How is prayer shaping your daily work as a leader and as a staff? One of my really, really good friends at Camp Luther is Mike Reek. And Mike Reek is actually an alumni. He was on team in 1991. And when we were at camp together, we spent every Friday morning out on the porch eating a bowl of cereal, talking about life, but we would spend half of that breakfast in prayer. And I feel like I have a really good prayer life asking God for a lot of things. I do a lot of asking. And the great thing that Mike Reek always talked about was we need to do just as good a job listening. And we'd have lots of phenomenal conversations of what that meant to be really listening to God, um, really hearing what He has to say for our lives. I think that's digging into Scripture. I think that's really uh, seeing God's hand in things, and then listening and moving when He gives you that little shove. Uh, before I came to Youth Encounter, uh, my wife and I were doing a lot of praying about what the next step was for us, because uh, at Thrivent, I love Thrivent. I love the job that I had, but I needed a different challenge. I needed something different. And we were really praying about what the next step was. And it goes back to that conversation that I had with Mike all the time. I was asking God and praying a lot about what do show me, what do you want from me? What can I do next? I want this. Can you make this happen? And it was about listening. And so, coming into this, there was a couple different job opportunities out there, and through prayer, I really felt that Youth Encounter was the one that was best for me. And sure enough, through the whole process, it became very clear that I needed that Youth Encounter was the direction that I wanted to go, and that God had a plan for me there. And when I was finally asked to be the new president, it was obviously a very clear sign from God. But even then, it was okay. These people think that I'm right, but God, is this truly what you want for me? And I need a clear answer from you. And that came pretty clearly. And so I'm really trying to do that in every single day. I truly believe that God answers prayer through a lot of different means. It's through that small, quiet voice. It's through the conversations that I have with other people. Uh, it's the feedback that I'm hearing when I'm talking with alumni, with pastors, with youth leader, and things like that. I've always felt that that's how God has spoken to me throughout my ministry and throughout my career. And so uh, I also want to address how prayer is working with our staff. I love the fact that almost every day I get a random email that's, hey, 11:38, let's meet in the conference room and let's pray. Or, hey, it's 2:30, let's pray, because why not, right? Uh, it's such a part of the daily fabric of what we do, and I love that. It's refreshing. Thrivent was a culture that was very faith-filled, and we opened all of our meetings in prayer, and we had devotions, and so it was very faith-filled, but this just takes it to a new level, and I love that about our staff, and I want to keep doing that. The past 10 years, Youth Encounters Ministry has struggled financially. Teams have shrunk considerably from 12 teams to 4. Events thrived in early 2000s, now seem to be shrinking. How will you help position YE to be financially stable for years to come? We need to take a really, really hard look at the programs that we offer. That goes for teams, that goes for international programs, it goes for the events that we run. And we need to look at it not from a perspective of this is what Youth Encounters always done, but we need to go to this is what we need to do. And it goes back to those circles that I was talking about, where you have the core ministry of sharing the gospel through youth ministry. Okay, those are the two unmovable things that are not going to change. And we need to realize that that's really what we're all about. And we need to move out to the what now. Can we still be financially viable doing events on weekends? Can we still be financially viable doing teams? Is team ministry still part of what we do? Those are all questions that are up in the air. And please, 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 do not take this as, well, it sounds like Tom's getting rid of teams, or it sounds like Tom's getting rid of events, or things like that. These are questions that I'm engaging with our staff right now about what we think we can do, because if we can come up with a way to make them financially viable, then we need to continue to do it. But Eric, you said in here, teams have moved from 12 to 4. We have been working really hard to continue to build those teams. We have worked extremely hard. Not only are we doing all the things that we used to do, but we're doing all sorts of other things to try to get new people in the door. I personally believe that the academic system right now is really against us right now. Not that they're trying to be against us, but you have more and more people going into graduate school, which means they are graduating 2 years later, 2 years poorer, and more than likely they have a very serious girlfriend or boyfriend. They are maybe engaged or maybe even married. And so to go on a year-long commitment is not as viable as it once was. When I started at camp in 2004, I only had a handful of people who were getting graduate degrees. When I left camp, roughly 60% of my staff were getting graduate degrees. All job applications now say advanced degree preferred. And so it's really hard to get team members in the door. Now, we're not going to change the academic system, but is there another way that we can get teams? Do our teams stay musical, or do we look at a different way of doing teams that isn't necessarily dependent on music, but maybe it's on something else? These are all questions that we have to look at, but I do think that we do need to look at the financial viability right now. And that's a hard picture to think of if you've been immersed in an organization for a long time. It's hard to think about that maybe teams are going to change from being musical to something completely different, because that's what you experienced back in the day. The ministry that has happened up until this point has been phenomenal. It has been a blessing to thousands to millions of people. Larry just was in my office the other day, and he had a bunch of numbers for me. And he was showing me how many people, and I think the grand total number, when you really, ballpark some numbers and whatnot, we've been in front of like 12 million people over the years. That's phenomenal. We just need to retool it. We need to think of a different way that we can do this. And if it means a significant change, then we're going to have to do that. But we have to remember that it comes down to that core ministry of sharing the gospel. And if that means that our new ministry model is to buy a printing press and make a bunch of Bibles and chuck them at high schoolers as they walk out of school, and that's going to have the biggest effect on the gospel, and it's also going to be financially viable, well, then that's what we move to. Now, obviously, that's not it. That's my joke, kind of idea. But, we've really talked with the board about the need to really look really hard and say, all things aside, how can we best share the gospel through youth ministry and then do it in a financially sustainable way? We have to look at it that way. How will you go about keeping alumni and supporters updated on the changes coming? We're going to do that in a number of ways. We're going to really be doing a lot through our social media, through Facebook, through Twitter, through newsletters, both online and snail mail. We hope to do more things like this, whether it's a chat online or maybe it's a just kind of a letter that I put out once a month or something like that. We want to keep you informed, and I would ask that I want you guys to be engaged with me. I want you to give me a call. I want you to email. I want you to ask questions and to give your feedback and opinions. because, you know, by the very fact that you guys are on this tonight means that you're engaged. It means that you have a deep passion for what's going on here at Youth Encounter, and that you only want the best for the organization and ultimately for the kids that we're trying to reach. And so I need you guys to stay engaged, and it's not just a one-way process of me reaching out to you or Youth Encounter reaching out to you. Please, by all means, come and talk to us. Give us a call, email. It's 8:34. I think we said we would do this from 7 till 9, so I am more than willing to continue to go until that time. I don't have any other questions up on the board right now. I think we've hit a lot of the questions that I've had on a sheet of paper here. But I do want to give this time. I want to, give you time to put up any more follow-up questions or anything that you want up on there. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Well, while I'm waiting for you guys to put questions up on the board, I want to share with you probably one of the most meaningful moments that I've had so far at Youth Encounter. I flew down to Phoenix to to meet with uh, a couple who have been good donors for us in the past, and I had never met them before. I had talked to them for like 2 minutes on the phone, and when I walked in we were at a Denny's, and we walked in, and they immediately stood up and they gave me a big hug, which I wasn't used to coming from the corporate world. And they gave me a big hug. And that was really meaningful to me because it showed that they were excited about me. They were excited about the direction of the ministry. They were excited about the ministry itself. We then sat down, and they immediately started talking about their experiences with Youth Encounter and the lives that they saw change, that they had gone and visited parents of teamers and just all the stories they heard about how team changed their kids and things like that. They then handed me two sheets of paper that just had a ton of notes and opinions and thoughts written down about how what they thought Youth Encounter should be doing. And it wasn't in such a way that like, hey, I've given money and so I think you should do this. That wasn't it at all. It was, I have such a passion for this ministry. I feel so strongly about this. Here are just some thoughts that we have, and you can take them or leave them, but we care enough to write it down. We care enough to share it with you. And so we talked through those things, and they asked me questions about what my vision was for Youth Encounter. And when we got up, they gave me an even bigger hug. It was so fun. And to me, that just showed how amazingly passionate our donors, our alumni, our volunteers, and our staff are. That they love the ministry. They have seen how many good things this ministry has done, how many opportunities we've had to share the gospel. And that's a big responsibility, not only on my shoulders, but all of our shoulders, is that we can continue to make this happen. Question from Trish: with the numbers in Lutheran churches declining, how will Youth Encounter grow its audience? I think we do need to move beyond our Lutheran constraints. This is taking a page out of my Thrivent career. If you're familiar with Thrivent moved from the Lutheran world to the broader Christian market. If you see the trends in the Lutheran church, Lutheran Church is literally dying off. It is getting smaller and smaller every day. And so, there's always the question of, well, why don't you work harder to get more Lutherans? And I always, when people ask me that at Thrivent, I always answer them this way: what do you think we've been doing for the last 50 years? And so it's the same thing with Youth Encounter. We've tried really, really hard, and we're doing the best that we can with the resources that we have. When you look at the number of churches that come to our events, we still have pretty much the same number of churches. It's just they're bringing less people. Confirmation numbers are down by 50% over the last 10 years. It's not a trend that I don't believe is going to change. And so how do we do that? I think we have to reach out to the broader Christian market. I think that, an earlier question was about people who don't claim a denomination, or they're the nuns. That's the way culture is going. We have so many people who are saying, I'm not Lutheran, I'm simply a Christian. I believe in Jesus, I'm just not willing to say that I'm Baptist or Catholic or Lutheran. And so, I agree with half the things that the ELCA does, but not the other half, or the LCMS, and not the other half of what they believe. More and more people are thinking that way. And so I think it's a lot harder, whether right or wrong, it's a lot harder to stick to one point. And this is where I get to, everyone can really get on board with the idea that Christ died for us, that he rose again, and that it is because of that action that we have everlasting life. That's the most important message that we can be sharing. We need to be sharing it over and over and over again and pounding it home any way that we can. And that's a message that we can share in the broader Christian market. And I think we need to appeal to that, because if there's anything I know about youth ministry, it's that more people equals more fun equals more engagement. So if we have 100 Lutherans at an event versus 600 Christians at an event, and everyone's getting really excited about it, I think we can do more damage for the kingdom, and damage in a good way. That we can get more people excited about the message of Christ if we open ourselves up to a broader Christian market. Now, we can still do that from a Lutheran base. I don't want to forget that. Every day I live in society, I interact with people, with my friends, as a Lutheran. I come at life with a Lutheran perspective. And it colors the way I think about politics. It colors the way I think about societal issues, our culture, and things like that. When I have conversations with people about it, that's what informs my decision. I can still be a Lutheran in a Christian environment, in a non-Christian environment, and I can approach it that way. It's where we're just trying to hit people over the head over and over and over with Lutheran theology, where then people start walking away from the table. So how can we infuse our Lutheran theology in the way that we do events, that we do teams and things like that, in such a way that engages those non-denominational people, the people in other synods. Those are things that our staff is trying to address and that we're thinking about every single day. I think I'm going to go back. One of the things, I caught this here. How will Youth Encounter grow its audience? How do we get out there and grow that audience with a Catholic church, with a Baptist church, with the non-denominationals or whatever? That's where it comes back to you guys as volunteers, as alumni. You living in your community probably know somebody who goes to that Baptist church or that non-denominational church. You maybe, your kid plays soccer with the pastor's kid from, the Baptist church or whatever. That gives you an opportunity to go to that church and say, hey, I'd like to tell you about a ministry that's really awesome, and I'd like to see how we as a community can get on board with Youth Encounter and, get engaged with this really great event that they're having in the area. That's where we can use you. That's how we plan to get engaged, because again, it's that relational aspect. If I give a cold call to that pastor, he's not going to take my phone. He or she is not going to take my phone call. But if you go and warm up that audience for me, it makes it a lot easier. Do you think Youth Encounter will abandon the Lutheran label in order to appeal to other churches? Again, I just want to reiterate that I think we have the ability to be Lutheran in a broader Christian market. We can start with that basis of Lutheranism, and it is a slippery slope from, a couple of years, how long ago was it, 10 years ago, or whenever we dropped the Lutheran off of our name, that was kind of a big deal because it can be a very slippery slope to mission drift, like I was talking about earlier, saying, okay, we're not Lutheran because we don't want to scare off other Christians. Well, then we can get to, well, we don't want to do too much Christian stuff because we don't want to scare off non-Christians. And then all we're doing is singing, songs for fun and just doing service because we think it's something good that we do. We have to be careful about that. We have to stay true to the mission of sharing the gospel through youth ministry. Now, that gospel we take from a particularly Lutheran perspective, but how much do we want to how far down the road do we want to go with that? Do we want to have a breakout session on, hey, you don't accept Christ, Christ accepts you? Well, you know what? The non-denominationals don't really buy into that, but wouldn't it be great if they were at our events? Wouldn't it be great if we got someone excited about Christ and we don't really worry about the accepting thing quite yet? That's something that they go back to their church and talk about. So we do our events, we do our teams because God calls us to do that from a Lutheran perspective, and we can continue to be a Lutheran organization. We have to be very careful about it moving forward so that we don't have that mission drift. And it's something that the board needs to keep me accountable to, and it's something that I need to keep our staff accountable to as we move down the road. Hope that answers the question about the Lutheran label. All right. We're getting to the end of our time here, and if there isn't any other questions, what I want to do is I kind of want to wrap this up, and then I want to close us in prayer. We've talked a lot of things about a lot of things. There's been a lot of questions, and I think, in this kind of format, it's really easy to take some things out of context. I mean, I already know there's some certain things that I've said here tonight that I was like, ugh, I wish I hadn't said it that way. That's why I encourage you to call, to email, so that we can have a better back and forth conversation about some of my thoughts about moving Youth Encounter forward. So in recapping kind of this whole conversation, when I was hired, the boards had two things for me to do. One, increase the development side of Youth Encounter. We need to get new people in the door that are willing to support financially. We need to meet with the people who are giving already and somehow increase that giving. We need to get more people in the door that are excited about this organization, that want to volunteer, that want to be engaged, that want to give. That's true of any type of organization. It's not just ours. But we need to do that specifically because it just needs to be done. The other piece that the board told me to do was that we needed to set a new strategic direction for this organization. Where we are financially right now, we cannot continue to do the things that we're doing now into the future. If we continue to do that, our organization will no longer exist. And so we have to find a new way of doing things, whether that's tweaking what we're doing right now, or if it's massively changing how we do youth ministry, whether it's adding a a brand new program that's huge in scope, or if it's taking away a certain thing, or maybe it's just putting something on hiatus for a little bit, or maybe whatever it looks like, maybe it's just painting it up. We need to be doing something different, and we need to do that soon in order to make this, because the number one challenge right now is that we need to make this organization financially viable. That has to happen before we go anywhere else. But we have to do that in a way that we are staying true to that core, again, that core of sharing the gospel in the context of youth ministry. And that final ring outside of that, the what, that is the thing that we're looking at. The gospel and the youth ministry, that is not changing, and it won't. We are not going anywhere near mission drift because of that. So how do we do this? And we have to ask some really hard questions about what do our programs look like right now? What do they look like in the future? How do we continue to operate in a Lutheran world? Can we operate in a broader Christian world? These are all questions that are still being asked, that are still being talked about, that are still being discussed. There has been no hard decisions made yet about anything, because these are all decisions. The decisions that need to be made not only need to be talked about and thoroughly vetted and developed, they also have to go through our board. Our board needs to have final say on this. And so when we look at what's going to happen moving forward, these are big decisions that have to happen quickly. But I need everybody to know that this isn't just a Tom thing. This is working with the staff, working with our alumni, working with our donors, talking with pastors and youth leaders and everybody out there that I can possibly talk to, so that we can arrive at the right decisions, that we can arrive at a solution that's going to continue help this organization continue, and so that we can continue to share the gospel and continue to do it in a financially viable way. I hope that what you took away from this is that we are working really, really hard. I hope that you have trust and faith in me as a person and as a leader, that we can move this organization from where it is now into a really vibrant, gospel-filled, gospel-preaching organization moving forward, like we always have been. And I also hope that you know that I truly appreciate and truly understand the vast impact that Youth Encounter has already had on so many people. And that is not lost on me, and is not lost on our staff. And we are hoping and praying every single day that God continues to bless us. So with that, I'd like to close us in prayer. So we'll just go from there. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for each of the people who are here tonight on this video chat. We thank you for those alumni and those donors who are engaged in this process. We thank you, Lord, for blessing this ministry for 50 years. It has reached so many people with the good news of your Son, Jesus Christ. And each and every day, Lord, we hear about so many different lives that have been changed. We pray, Lord, that moving forward, that you give us the wisdom, that you give us the guidance, the answers that we need, that will move this organization to a place that is your will, because that is what we seek. We seek your will on this earth, that this organization can glorify you, that it does your will, and that it can have an impact on the faith lives of youth around this country and around the world. Lord, I pray that as we move forward, that you would move in each of our hearts and minds, whether it's an idea to move this organization forward, or a way to get other people involved, that the whole Youth Encounter family can really band together right now and help make this organization all that it can be, and one that again glorifies you. Lord, all this we ask and pray in your name, by grace through faith in Christ. Amen. Hey everybody, thanks for coming. I really appreciate your time here tonight. Again, please reach out, give me a call, give me an email. I'd love to talk with you further about what Youth Encounter has in store in the future. So have a good night, everybody. See ya.